The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-host and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on our live shows.
Broadcast for shooters, hunters, and gun enthusiasts. This is the Firearms Radio Network. The bandwidth for this episode of This Week in Guns is sponsored by Patriot Patch Company. PatriotPatch.co.
Welcome to This Week in Guns. This show is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network and Patriot Patch Company.
And the show offers commentary on the latest firearms industry news, information, and buzz. I'm your host, Sean Heron. And as always, I get the pleasure of introducing our guest tonight. First up, welcome back, National Second Amendment advocate, founder of the 2013 Colorado Recall Movement, grassroots example, past NRA board director, firearms instructor, co-host of To the Republic. It's Tim Knight. What's up, buddy?
Hey, man. Glad to see you.
Glad to have you here. And next up, we've got a newbie to the show, but not a newbie to the industry. She's been in it for a while. She's a firearms industry insider and marketing at Rainier Arms, wine and gamer nerd, and co-host of the Peak podcast, Shelly Ray. What's up?
How's it going?
I'm doing well. I was looking at your name here, and then I looked up at the screen right as I was about to say your name, and then I don't know.
I have lots of names. None of them matter.
It is. It's great. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. Go check out Patriot Patch Company. That's patriotpatch.co. They do the Patch of the Month Club, which is one of my favorite things, and also Second Call Defense. You can find more about them at firearmsradio.tv/SCD. And let's get right into the stories. Jack Wilson, you may remember him from the Texas church in White Settlement, Texas. He was to receive and did receive the Medal of Courage from the Texas governor, which is pretty great. At the same time, he was given a custom rifle by Sons of Liberty Gun Works. And people also pointed out that when he accepted the medal from the Texas governor, that there was a distinct printing going on his side that he was concealed carrying at that time as well. I think these are all kind of great things. It's really taking an individual who used his firearm for extreme good, giving him recognition and getting that positive that positive view of firearms ownership and self-defense out there. Shelly, you're new. I just want to hear your thoughts on the whole Jack Wilson thing and the medal and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm so excited that we're finally getting a concealed carry story like this that is getting national recognition. It's so cool to see it at this level in the media and being talked about. I feel like there's a lot of self-defense shootings that don't get as much recognition or discussion, and we're finally seeing something. Definitely.
Now, Tim Knight, I don't think I've talked to you about the Jack Wilson stuff. What are your thoughts here on the recognition that he's getting?
I think it's phenomenal. You know, I think that the good guy with a gun stories, we don't hear enough of them. And it also, I really encourage everyone to seek out the video and watch it, because you're seeing some proper training there. There's some front sight work, and he was right on task there. And, kudos to recognizing him for being a good guy with a gun. And it also points out how incredibly important proper training is. It was great to see the whole thing. And of course, not psyched about the loss of life, but I also understand that these stories need to be told, because the people who want to disarm us and take us away say that we don't know what we're doing. And I'm going to say, yeah, no, sorry, that's not the case at all.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you mentioned his training, like it was amazing. And it was the fact that there was no thought involved in this. He did a thing that he did, and it was a great shot. And I bet when he's sitting around having beers with his buddies afterwards and they talk about it, my guess is that he's like, I don't know how it happened. I just drew the gun and did the thing that I've done thousands of times before, because that guy had switched direction. He was moving swiftly in the opposite direction, and he was 30 plus feet away. I mean, it was a lucky shot, but it was a lucky shot because he had done the work ahead of time to get the training in and all that good stuff.
Yep.
That was one of my favorite things about the video, is watching it. You could see that he trained, he shot, and it's something that you can take to people and be like, this is why you need to be out there training.
Mm-hmm. And Shelly, you've done a lot of training, right?
I have. I'm still not good, but I've done a lot of training. I just need to do more.
That's exactly how I feel too.
Yeah, it's always you never stop. If you stop, you're doing it wrong.
Yep, 100%. Every time I go to a class, I'm like, oh, I learned cool new things, and I still felt like a beginner. So everyone out there, if you're hearing our voices, go do some training. Like, look at this as a great way and a great example and a great reason that we should spend more time getting proficient with our firearms.
So Sean, on that church thing too, we pointed out firearms training, and we were, of course, Jack Wilson was rightfully acknowledged for his great stuff, but this is something you talk about a lot, is getting medical training as well. There was medical training needed afterwards before the first responders got there. So folks, when you're going to look about training, don't forget that medical training should very much be part of your repertoire. It's got to be.
Yeah, 100% agree. If you want to hear us talk about tactics, you can check out the episode of We Like Shooting where we talked about this. And if you want to hear about medical and response and direct threat and things like that, you can listen to an episode of the, well, actually, let's see. I think we did it on Skinny Medic's YouTube channel. So we talk about all the different aspects of this and everything that we can learn from it too, which I think is very important. Good Samaritan kills man who ambushed Arizona State troopers. So trooper gets a call about a car accident, or someone was shooting at a car. Gets there, it was overturned, and a woman had been ejected from the wreckage. He starts working to block lanes and suddenly gets ambushed by somebody who attacks him, shoots him in the chest shoulder area, and then fights him to the ground. Passerby sees it going, goes to respond to help out the trooper, and the trooper's asking for help. The guy who was attacking him ignored orders and commands to stop attacking the trooper, goes back to his car, grabs a gun, fatally shoots the suspect. So far, everything looks pretty great, and they're kind of praising this passerby for really doing some great work. Tim, what are your thoughts on this?
I guess, if you're going to step out of the car and start to take action, you got to follow through on that. You don't just get to walk away. A lot of people, I'm sure, would unfortunately probably drive by, or they're not prepared to do that. But if you're going to get out of your car and assist, you got to follow through. And I read it several times. I know that the state had reached out to the Good Samaritan and thanked him, and I know there's going to be a full investigation. But you got to be real careful about this, because you can often come up into a scene and not know exactly what was going on. Now, this officer was uniformed, and that was a thing. And of course, that's the most dangerous part of their job, when they get out of the car and go forward or deal with stuff. This one was pretty clear cut, but you do need to be careful. But how awesome is that, again, where a good guy with a gun had the opportunity to make a difference and at least save the officer's life. And perhaps if that other guy had not been an issue, perhaps the woman could have possibly also lived.
Yeah, 100% agree. Shelley, what are your thoughts on this one?
I definitely agree that there's a lot of risk that Good Samaritan took getting out of the car and getting involved. There's a lot that can go wrong there. I think it's interesting to talk about this right after we've talked about that church shooting, because there's so many more steps going on here between, it sounds like, when this guy gets out of the car and when any kind of engagement on his part happens. And I think it just shows how important mindset is in all of this, where you need to be prepared for whatever is set in front of you, regardless if that's, I'm going to draw and shoot really fast right now, or I need to analyze the situation and figure out how I can engage in the best way possible.
Yeah, that's actually a very, very good point, because it does say he has to go back to his car to get his gun. And, kind of thinking about all those things ahead of time helps us prepare just a little better. But yeah, very well put. Moving on to some NRA stuff. NRA adopts attendance policy for board members. I remember reading about this a lot. Adam Crowd had put out some stuff about this when he was running for the NRA board of directors. Tim, you've been there. You've been a board of director member. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this first. Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is this the right direction? Do they know it's the right direction, or are they just doing it for publicity at this point?
Well, a little background on Adam Kraut, and I talked to him before we brought this up. Adam and I originally discussed this bylaw in 2016 when he ran, and he kind of hashed it out and bounced the idea off me, and I was very much in favor of it, because when I ran in 2015, I laid out, look, I'm going to term limit myself. I'm going to attend these meetings. I believe attendance is important. And when I got there, too many directors were not attending the meetings. So when Adam decided to run, he said, Tim, what are some thoughts on what, suggestions I could make? And he came back with a bylaw attendance thing, and I thoroughly agreed with him, and we kind of hashed out some of my thoughts and his thoughts, and most of them were his. But look, the NRA directors are elected by the members with the assumption that that the people elected are going to attend the meetings and take it seriously, and not enough of them do, in my opinion. So I'm glad to see a policy And I'm a little disappointed that it is not a bylaw. For-profit corporations in the state of New York do require a director attendance thing. Now, the NRA is not a for-profit corporation, but they do very serious things. I would very much like to see it a bylaw and not a policy, because if it's a policy, that means if they don't want to actually follow up with it, they don't have to. The bylaw forces them to do it. So I think it's a step in the right direction. I'm glad to see it, but I'm a little concerned that it leaves a little bit of a slippery, well, we just might not get around to it because it's a policy and not a bylaw.
Very interesting. Now, Shelley, I saw this and I saw the people who were board of directors members who were just not going ever. Well, a lot of the celebrities were kind of in that boat. And as an NRA member, it angered me. So I'm definitely good to see this, but Tim, that makes some good points there. Shelley, how do you feel about this new policy?
Well, and I don't know the inner workings of the NRA very well, but I do believe that they are an incredibly valuable asset for our community, and we need to be able to support them. But that also means that the people within that organization on the board of directors should be held accountable and should be showing up, because that's the only way the strength of that organization is going to continue.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm just like, okay, you're on the board, but you're not going to any of these meetings. And what's her nuts from Florida? I can't remember now. I have forgotten her name, which is Hammer. I forgot her name, which is actually a great thing. I hope more people do as well. But yeah, she wasn't going to any of them. And, we kind of see where these things go. So I'm happy to see this. I think it's a step in the right direction. Do I immediately change my stance on the NRA and think that everything's good? Absolutely not. But I will give credit where credit's due. Laura Ingram predicts that Second Amendment sanctuary movements will be a SCOTUS issue. And this is kind of interesting. So it comes to us from Fox News, who I used to actually listen to Laura Ingram on AM radio a long time ago. Now she's on Fox News, but she says that this is probably going to go because the deal is this. The sanctuary counties have said that and I'm paraphrasing and just generalizing and summarizing here, but they basically say that no county employees or money or anything can be used to infringe on the Second Amendment rights of the county's population. Virginia actually does have laws in place that say that can't happen. And that's why Laura is saying that this is probably going to go to the Supreme Court. I think it is very interesting because 120 plus counties in Virginia are now sanctuary counties, or at least have adopted resolutions that protect the Second Amendment. But the state, they're pushing very, very, very hard. Do you think, Shelley, that this is going to go Supreme Court? Do you think it matters? Like, I'm not 100% sure what I think on this one.
Yeah, that's the tricky one. I definitely think it matters. Anything in that Second Amendment camp, especially coming at it from here in Washington and King County, where we have, kind of our same little pockets of safety. I would like to see that. I would like to see the whole thing go away, but I would really like to see that not go all the way to the Supreme Court. That would be great. But at the same time, if we can say this is something that's protected by the Second Amendment, then that sounds good.
Yeah. Tim, she said that sanctuary cities in the United States, they're shielding people. They're not working with ICE, which is a contradiction. She says, so you're allowed to shield illegal immigrants in your cities and towns, and they're illegally here. That's accepted by like kind of the left-wing elites in the government, but somehow sanctuary counties for the Second Amendment is not a thing. Tim, thoughts?
Yeah, the Constitution, there is the argument of the 10th Amendment, and that the states have rights when it's not stated that in the federal Constitution. The problem herein lies is that these sanctuary counties and towns in Virginia are saying, look, we want to observe the Constitution here. Well, the Constitution is not just the Second Amendment. It is, pick another amendment. Which one next are they going to say you can't have? That doesn't work that way. We still have due process in all of these cities and towns and these counties. So which one are they going to do? So I think it probably will end up going to the Supreme Court. There will be lawsuits because what they're doing in Virginia, and I know we're going to go deep into it tonight, is so expansive that they're trying to literally turn off the parts of the Constitution they don't like. So what's next? So I say it's probably absolutely going to go to the Supreme Court and get caught up in the legal system for a while. And it probably goes to show us how incredibly important judicial appointments at the federal and Supreme Court level are going to be in the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Let's see. I'm going to look for, here we go. I'm going to move because of what you just mentioned to a story that's a little bit later in the show. But Bloomberg discusses his plan to pack the Supreme Court of the United States with anti-gun justices is the headline from The Truth About Guns. And this comes to us in a Chicago Tribune op-ed. The anti-gun former New York City mayor described his fear that the Supreme Court would do the worst possible thing he could think of. He's afraid the justices would dare to vote to uphold rights enshrined in the Constitution and rule in favor of pro-Second Amendment voices in the case of in our New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus the City of New York. And he says that at the law at the center of the case, which prevented New Yorkers from transporting their legally purchased firearms outside the home unless it was one of the 7 gun ranges in the city, was an unnecessary restriction, and said that it was rightly rescinded. So he wants to actually pack the Supreme Court with anti-gun justices because, and look, I'm not going to discredit him for that because that's clearly what pro-gun people want to happen as well. But yeah, he has a plan to do it. And Shelley, do you think, it's kind of scary, right? I think one of the best things personally that Trump has done is put more kind of pro-Second Amendment, pro-freedom justices on the bench, but I don't know. It is a scary thought. What do you think, Shelley?
I think all of it is a scary thought. Going into the election next year, I feel like we've kind of got our heads on the chopping block as far as being Second Amendment supporters, and one false step and it's all headed, I don't know where.
I know.
But I do know that it's concerning to me that any one part of the government has so much power that just stacking the deck can have that kind of effect. It's there and there's not a lot that we can do about it at this juncture, but I find that concerning on a basic level.
Yeah, I do agree. Now, Tim Knight, the direct quote is, "As president, I will appoint judges who understand that the Second Amendment allows for common sense limits on gun ownership." And yeah, I don't think it's very common, nor is it sense. But Tim, what do you think?
Sean, what I want for judges, I want judges that are going to follow the Constitution. I don't want activists on the court. That's not their job. That's not what they took an oath to. That's not what the job description is. It just simply isn't. And anyone who goes and tries to justify things using foreign laws and a thought process based on public opinion, they're doing it wrong. We're getting the democracy, or they're making the democracy they say we have. Nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does the word democracy appear. They're trying to make it, and they're going to try and make it through the court. That's not how this works. And we're only going to keep it unless we understand that I don't need conservative judges or liberal judges. What I need is constitutional judges.
Yeah, I think that's very well put. Let's talk a little bit about Colorado. I'm sitting in Colorado right now, and these are definitely things that I'm concerned about. Colorado woman red flags cop who shot her son. So let me briefly try to summarize this because it's kind of ridiculous. So in the new Colorado red flag laws that just recently took effect, there's a clause in there that talks about family or household member. And there's a pretty broad definition of what that means. And in this case specifically, this woman is using the term child in common, saying that her and the person she submitted this red flag or this ERPO against have a child in common. And you're like, okay, well, that makes sense. Until I tell you that it is a cop who actually shot and killed her son, who was wielding a knife, would not put it down, and was a danger to himself, others, and the police officer. They had no relationship. They had no knowledge of each other's existence before this happened. This was back in 2017, I believe. Yeah, in Fort Collins, Colorado. And she filed this saying that they had a child in common, which is her child that the cop shot as part of his law enforcement duties. And she has put in this ERPO against the officer, which would basically strip him of his firearms and take them away. This is not how this was meant to work. And I don't think that anyone in the Colorado government would say that this is what it was meant to do. But the problem is that the law was so poorly written and so broadly written, and it was rife for misuse. This is the first case of misuse, 2 weeks after it actually went into effect. And wow, it's just like craziness, I think. Tim?
Yeah, Sean, it goes to show you how poorly they thought it out. They got given a kind of a soft blueprint on, hey, we should do this. And even they wouldn't even listen to the people who were saying, look, you're about to go down this road with these ERPOs. You guys are missing all of these things. They didn't even see this one coming, where people could kind of twist the words a little bit and then get it through. So a judge would go, well, clearly, this is a thing. Thankfully, it slowed down a little bit when people started realizing what's going on. But this lady made a YouTube video trying to justify her case, saying that she swore all these things. And one of the things I recall about this Colorado thing, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Sean, there are very few, if any, penalties for actually doing this incorrectly or knowingly doing it incorrectly.
Yeah, we're waiting to actually find out. And the big concern that I have is, if this wasn't against a law enforcement officer, if it was just against a random person, a random citizen, like would it be getting this much publicity or not? Shelley, the whole thing is just nuts. Like, this is not how it was intended to be used. Clearly, in my opinion, they have to. I mean, she perjured herself at the very minimum, and because she swore and attested to all these things in her ERPO. But wow, what a disaster! Shelley, weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a shining example of what exactly can go wrong with these red flag laws and why they're such a terrible idea. It leaves so much room for people to get caught up in whatever drama in life and have their gun rights be one of the consequences of that. And I think you're right. We would absolutely not be having this conversation if it wasn't a law enforcement officer. People probably wouldn't be talking about it, and it would probably be being viewed in a completely different light. But I think that a lot of gun laws start this way, where they start with the best of intentions, but the way that they're enacted is not practical.
Yeah, and we fought pretty hard in Colorado to stop this thing from being even put into place. But I mean, we lost that battle. It's in place, and already, what is this? I think maybe the second time it's actually been used in Colorado since January 1st, I believe, is when it went into effect. And it's the second time it's been used. One time was initiated by law enforcement, and this clearly fraudulent time it was initiated by an angry mother whose son played stupid games and won a stupid prize. It's not that I don't feel for her, because I do, but this is bad. She perjured herself, and she needs to see that the other side of that law enforcement and, I don't know, judiciary process, I guess is what I want to say.
There should definitely be consequences for that kind of perjury. It's just like when and I'm going to forget what it's called now because I'm on the spot, but when people started like sending the SWAT team to people's houses, swatting. Yeah. And that's exactly what comes to mind for me.
Actually, yeah, very good point. And here's the problem is, if they don't throw the book at her, like, look, this is a grieving mother. Mm-hmm. Plain and simple. Let's not forget that. I know that I forget that sometimes because I'm very cut and dry, black and white, but this is a grieving mother. But if they don't throw the book at this grieving mother and forget about it, like, how many other times is this going to happen? It will set a precedent in Colorado that people can just red flag for the hell of it. And, if this time it happened to be against a law enforcement officer, she's making a mockery of this law and of the system that they tried to set up. And it has to be hit hard, or else it'll just happen over and over and over again. 11-year-old in Mexico kills his teacher and himself in a school shooting. I hate to talk about this. This is tough stuff, but people want to say that this kind of thing only happens in the United States. It happens in Mexico. It happens elsewhere. It's not the epidemic that the mainstream media wants us to expect. And I mean, yeah, I see this. And when I read the article, if I take out the word Mexico and just look at it, it's not much different from anything that happens all over the entire globe. Shelley, what are your thoughts about this kind of thing happening in other places? Because so often, the elite in our country want us to think that this only happens in the United States, doesn't happen anywhere else.
Well, and I think that it's a lot more than just something like a school shooting. There's a lot of crime in other countries that gets overlooked for the sake of whatever statistics it is that people need to make their point. I think both sides have been guilty of it. But I think that this is it's a tragic example of things that we shouldn't ignore. You know, this is happening in other countries. This crime is happening in other countries. And by saying it's not or suggesting that it's not, we're actually doing a disservice to the world as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. Tim, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Sean, they had the article mentioned that they have a backpack search program. They search all the backpacks of all the kids every day. Clearly that didn't get done. So sometimes a plan is only as good as its implementation. But it also showed, of course, how tragic the whole thing was, but that parents, no matter where they are, worry about their kids. And of course, they want to do whatever they can to protect their kids. And perhaps if they had had an armed teacher program in Mexico, in that part of Mexico, or in that school, because I guess it was a private school, perhaps they would have had some sort of thought process to think that out. Of course, this is, quarterbacking after the case, but it's of course a tragedy, but they did have a plan. The kid, no one said anything leading up to that was a concern or an issue. So yeah, violence happens and perpetrated by evil people and sometimes uninformed people. And it's sad. And of course we should always be seeking, not demanding action, but we should seek things that actually work to try and at least deter, no matter where it is.
I do agree with that. They did mention clearly that the investigators are looking into reports that the boy was influenced by a particular video game. So we could see some of the same rhetoric spread across countries, at least.
Blame the game.
Yeah. Let's go across the ocean. New Zealand starts conducting raids in search of assault weapons they've seen on social media. I know, it's crazy. So this we know that at Christchurch there was the killing, and the guy live streamed it on Facebook, I believe. And then the prime minister came out and said that they were going to do all kinds of confiscations and make a lot of things illegal. And then they had the turn-ins and everything else. Well, this story came out on January 10th, 2020. And it is basically an op-ed by, I cannot pronounce that name, but basically he had posted when they were talking about confiscation and getting rid of guns and everything. He just posted about a magazine that he had. It was a prohibited magazine fitted to a 22 LR lever action rifle. In the article they put 22 RL, but I assume LR. And saying that basically this is what they're trying to outlaw, just this tiny little 22 lever action rifle. Well, he opened the door. There was a bunch of police officers outside. They basically took over the house, searched it, clearly against his will. His attorney, he called an attorney. They said, say nothing. And they found nothing. But this is it. This is the future. They are going door to door in New Zealand. This is what gun control advocates in the United States want as well. In Virginia, I guarantee if they get all this legislation through that we're going to talk about very soon, this is the next step, because registration, because any kind of buyback, any kind of social media posting, that all leads to confiscation. Now, Shelley, New Zealand, it's far from us, but I think we see far-reaching easy for me to say, implications from things like this. Would you agree?
Yes, without a doubt. And what really struck me about this article in particular, I remember reading it, was that he had actually gotten rid of the gun before the raid. So they found this gun on social media, raided his house, even though he had already legally gotten rid of the firearm like he was supposed to. So here we have a classic example of something that I could see happening so quickly in the US, where you have an outspoken person saying, I don't agree with this. You're raising your hand.
That would and be all of us.
Yeah, it's going to be all of us. Anybody whose face is on here right now for sure. And but it's still a law-abiding gun owner, as so many of us are. And because they're following the law, they're still getting punished for it. And I think that's a perfect example of how that can happen so quickly and so easily. And it's the law-abiding citizens that are getting punished.
Yeah, I so agree. And this was a year ago that he made these social media posts. So he made this post, and having that was illegal a year ago that he had clearly gotten rid of and turned in, or whatever he did with it. Tim, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, Sean, it's super slippery. And I think the officers are like, well, we really don't want to be doing this, but we're just going to keep doing it. Okay. I know that in Virginia, and this isn't one of the things we're discussing, at least so far down, is that, the governor is preparing to put in his budget a division within the state police for compliance. And we don't know where that's going to go, and whether it'll be low hanging fruit in the Richmond area or whatnot. I don't know. It's all very concerning, but being shown examples when people say, well, these kind of things aren't going to happen here and that can't happen here. Really? Yes, it can. And we're being shown.
It can and it will. We've seen it. I don't know. I've heard multiple reports of Katrina and confiscations and things like that. Sorry, Tim, what?
Oh, no, I was going to say just that.
Yeah. We've seen these things, and I've seen reports of and reports not of. So it's tough to find the truth, honestly, in today's 24-hour news cycle. Video shows Florida man walking down the street firing an AR-15. I saw this, and I said to myself, what the heck? I didn't hear about this. This seems crazy. This seems like something I would hear about. Just a guy walking down, committing acts of random violence and bloodshed in a Florida street, in a downtown Orlando street. Well, it turns out not actually the case. He was doing it, but apparently he was defending himself and responding to some things that had happened earlier. A group of men had tried robbing him. He was surrounded. He was punched in the face. He ran to his car, got a handgun and rifle. He did fire the gun in this video, but it turns out that even the witnesses that were there said that he was defending himself. And it's a very interesting discrepancy between the headline and the actual content of this. Orlando police officials called the actions reckless and dangerous and said innocent people could have been hurt. And I don't know, it's interesting to unpack because there's so many different facets of this. Yes, mistakes were made. Was it appropriate? Was it not appropriate? Tim Knight.
Well, the innocent person was harmed. He was the one attacked. And I know if I have to go to my car, that means my pistol has already been used. But I'm going to do what I have to do to defend myself. And, this is, again, the headlines making what turned out to be a man trying to defend himself. I'm going to go with the man trying to defend himself and not the news desk trying to make some sensational headline for the 11 o'clock news.
True. He did get arrested, Shelley, but what do you think about this? Again, he did make some mistakes, I think, but it is one of those weird headline versus content.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a classic sign of clickbait. People are going to click on anything that says Florida man, anything to do with Florida man. As far as him defending himself, I think that's really hard to say without all of the information necessary, whether or not he was in the right. But I think it shows one of the issues with the current news and media cycle and how we're all able to process information or not. Because how often do you actually click through and how often do you just read the headline and move on? Yeah,
no, I totally agree. APD, Albuquerque Police Department, starts entrapment effort with the new UBC or Universal Background Check law. So they're doing some sting operations.
Good evening. 6 months.
There we go. I haven't muted that one yet. They've launched this law enforcement operation aimed at this new state law. So basically they're looking around, finding posts and things, looking at ads online and making phone calls to people who are selling the guns. And then if the person agrees to do it without the background check or whatever, they're warning them at this point. So out of 50 sting calls made, they said they had to warn 14 people about the background check law. We talk very often on this show and on, just everywhere really, about enforcing the laws that are on the books. So they put this law on the books. Now they're doing this sting operation, little column A, little column B. I don't agree with universal background checks, but if they put it in place, should they enforce it? I don't know. Shelley, what do you think?
I mean, it's on the books. I think that at that point, if it's on the books, then it comes across to us as gun owners to be like, okay, this law is on the books, and to do everything in our power to follow that law as best we can. So we have universal background checks here in Washington now. But even prior to that, I would always try and be aware of who I'm selling my firearms to. I mean, there is a little bit of a moral obligation there to pay attention. I don't agree with universal background checks, but I also don't agree with people breaking the law like that either. I don't like the entrapment, though. That just seems shady.
Yeah, I actually agree. Tim, why don't you weigh in on that?
Yeah, it's the entrapment part that really bothers me. Of course, this was a law that they fought pretty hard against down there. I know the pro firearms Second Amendment community fought pretty hard against there because they realized that despite everything you guys just said and people selling stuff online, the criminals aren't getting their guns this way. And that was part of the story was we're going to prevent criminals from doing that. You may be reminding citizens of a new law. Okay. I may disagree with the law. Definitely I do. But they're not actually solving much in the way of crime prevention here. Criminals are still going to be stealing guns, getting them from other places, taking them from grandma or whatever. So this doesn't actually do anything. The other thing is that I think eventually Albuquerque Police Department will get tired of this and they just won't do it. And so this is some sort of upfront, let's do this and try and make our point now because eventually we're not going to do it. Because the article said a lot of New Mexico law enforcement simply isn't going to do this because they saw it as a waste of manpower. And that's what's going to happen to APD too. And I think that this is that upfront, let's do cool things and try and make a difference here. But ultimately, I think that this is going to go nowhere.
And Albuquerque residents, or rather, this is a state law. So New Mexico residents, I can honestly say that being from Colorado, having our universal background check law in place, which is useless in every way and hasn't caught any criminals that are doing anything really. I can tell you that one thing that will happen with this, just to kind of prepare you guys, is that gun stores and FFLs and things like that, they will start to, they don't want to do these kind of background checks. It does take a little bit of extra work, so they make it prohibitively expensive, $50 to $100 for a person-to-person transfer here in Colorado Springs. And if I may virtue signal, I think that's wrong and I think it's lame. And I know they don't want to do it because they're not selling a gun, they're not making a ton of money. But I look at my FFL as a responsibility, and I look at it as an opportunity to get more legally owned firearms in the hands of responsible citizens in the United States. And I do everything in my power to do so. So I immediately, before I even got my FFL, made a policy of I charge a specific amount per background check. If I have to do one, it's X price. If I have to do two, it's X price. It's not gouging anybody. And I just do that because I think that these laws are stupid, and I hate to see people gouging and taking advantage of it just because they don't want to do this kind of background check.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sean, to your point with exactly what you're doing, if you're uncomfortable selling a firearm to somebody that you don't know and there aren't these laws, there's nothing should prevent you. It should encourage you to go to a dealer and run this if you're not sure, because you're not supposed to be, transacting with people that you don't know, or like you have both said, it's a responsibility. So that responsibility may require that both parties spend a little money to check. That's okay if you believe in the system.
Well, and on the same point, I mean, we're just taking something that's already illegal and making it more illegal and throwing more manpower at it, which we're barely enforcing the laws that are on the books. I know here in Washington State, we recently passed a law, well, I guess it's been 6 months ago now, where to buy a pistol or a semi-automatic rifle, you have to go through local law enforcement and have them run the background check. And they can't keep up. I mean, you're waiting so long to get your gun while law enforcement's trying to run this. It's ridiculous. And so if we don't have the manpower to handle the existing laws on the books, why are we creating new ones and then creating ridiculous entrapment stings to try and catch people?
Because they don't really care that it works. They want to prevent people. I imagine, Shelley, would you think just like it's such a hassle, maybe I just won't do it, or maybe grandma won't do it, or somebody. They're trying to just make more barriers to, well, it's just easier not to.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of that. And one of the really interesting implications that we've seen here is the effect it's had on FFLs. I mean, Sean, you're talking about increasing the price for FFL transfers and how some of that has gotten out of the control. Absolutely. But at the same time, we're creating more work for small businesses and we're creating more unhappy customers for small businesses. I know that after these laws pass, it's gotten really difficult for especially very small FFLs to keep people happy because they can't release the gun until they can release the gun.
Yeah, totally agree. Good points. Let's move to Virginia here. There's a ton of stuff to unpack, but I'm going to move down just a little bit to an article from The Hill. Governor Northam plans to use emergency powers to ban weapons ahead of next week's rally. So this governor has declared a state of emergency to temporarily ban weapons on Capitol grounds. For people who don't know, this is upcoming. It's Lobby Day in Virginia. This is a thing that's happened for, Tim, do you even know how long?
I don't know. It's a pretty long tradition. I think it exceeds well over 20 years. I think it may be a long-standing tradition in Virginia.
Yeah, I agree. It's where citizens of Virginia show up at the state capitol to lobby for gun rights. It's basically, they get all gun owners and Second Amendment advocates and everyone who wants, firearms and freedom and things in Virginia. They all show up at the state capitol as a show of solidarity in our community. And they do this every single year. It's a long-standing thing. But because Virginia's government went very blue in the last election, they are trying to throw a ton of stuff through. And we're going to talk about a lot of that stuff. But they said that they have actual bona fide threats of violence. And because of that, he is declaring a state of emergency in Richmond from Friday evening till Tuesday evening. This includes a ban of weapons of any kind in Capitol Square during that time. Now, I also want to mention before we move on that Rally Day has historically had people open carrying, whether it's rifles, whether it's pistols, whether it's anything. They showed up. As far as I'm aware, there's been no violence on Lobby Day. There's been no violence on Lobby Day at any point in the past that I have seen. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but
I believe you're wrong. You're not wrong.
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
Shelly, go ahead, Tim.
Nope. I was
just gonna say, Shelly, like this seems like an abuse of power, and maybe they have bona fide threats. I don't know, but somehow I doubt it. It seems like an abuse.
I mean, regardless, it's definitely abuse of power. I'm personally getting kind of tired of hearing state of emergency. I feel like we're getting to the point where it's getting thrown around as an excuse to do whatever that politician feels like, and I think that's a problem. Another thought that I had while you were talking about this is, if you have if they do have a threat of violence, why are they disarming people? Do they really think that whoever's threatening violence is going to just show up unarmed because they said so? I mean,
that's what I think.
Yeah.
Which is such a ridiculous thought process. Honestly, I don't understand it. Tim, lay down some thoughts.
So they've laid out a map of the access. They're restricting access to one side of the Capitol up by the George Washington. For those familiar with the Virginia State Capitol, there's a George Washington statue with him on his horse, and everyone's going to have to walk around the Capitol grounds and go in that way. It's where the state police have a little place set up to do screenings, and they're going to cut everything off, and they're going to have a few exits, but they will have a deterrent, I'm sure. But if it's not a good scene, both from a safety standpoint, because honestly, I mean, we have NRA annual meetings, we have Lobby Day, we have all these things. Nothing happens every there because there are a lot of good people with guns. I am concerned the governor is looking for another Charlottesville thing, and he's using it as an excuse, because these things don't have a history of that, and I think he's using it for his convenience. And if something were to very unfortunately be an issue, the first people they're going to be is to blame gun owners, which would be stupid, of course, because they were told they could be disarmed. But that's not how it will go down. Gun owners will be blamed no matter what. So I'm hoping that everyone is, of course, very vigilant and paying attention to everything they can. And if you see something, say something. Remember, folks, we need to be sitting on our soapbox and the ballot box. This is not time for the cartridge box.
Yeah,
it seems to me, it sounds exactly like something a politician would do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just to make a statement.
Without question. On January 13th, 2020, it was reported that NRA is handing out free 30-round magazines at Virginia gun control protest. We saw a similar thing in Colorado. I don't know, Shelly, did you guys see similar things when you had some crazy legislation put in?
We haven't had any magazine capacity go through yet. They're talking about it now. I believe there's a rally in Olympia on Monday regarding the bill that's been proposed. I would like to think that if something like that were to come into consideration, that someone would step up to the plate. I think that, I like it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no, I do too. And I think that the amount that Magpul put into Colorado, and don't forget, Magpul was a Colorado company until all this stuff happened. But I have been critical of their abandonment of Colorado in the past. And I think they just wanted to move to get tax incentives in another state. And I think they just used this as an excuse. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't want to besmirch their name because they have done good. And I don't think that they're all bad. And I still use Magpuls just about daily. But Tim and I, is this a good thing? Is it virtue signaling? Is it?
No, it was a good thing. Look, you're going to tell us we can't have these. Haha, we're going to hand these out on the Capitol steps. How awesome. And I know that a lot of people did get upset about the fact that there were going to be 2 rallies. And look, this was that day they handed those magazines out was the first day the Senate was meeting, and a lot of these bills were coming up, and they wanted to pack it and remind gun owners, hey, you got to be here. Hey, incentives, hey, little Pac-Man dots get you here. I'm all in. I thought it's effective. I'm glad to see it. We don't engage with our legislatures enough, and I'm glad to see the hallways were packed as VCDL and the NRA both made videos, and I watched the committee meetings, and things were passing out of committee on party lines, but the rooms were packed with pro Second Amendment, pro freedom, pro constitutional gun owners, and I love it because I'm thrilled to see they're engaged with their state government.
Yeah. So they are in session now, correct?
Yep.
All right. So they're in session now. Not only have they declared the state of emergency, but they also banned guns in the Virginia Capitol. And this is kind of an interesting thing because if you remember correctly, there's literally legislators who open carried on the floor and in the buildings there, and they have said no. They are muscling through a sharp policy shift in a place where lawmakers often packed heat on the floor. Thank you, Washington Post, for that eloquent journalism there. But the policy adopted over vehement Republican objections is the first strike for gun control by the House and Senate, both under Democratic control for the first time in decades. And House Speaker Eileen Filler-Corn says that our objective here is keeping everyone safe. It's being done in countless states throughout the United States. This is a nothing burger. That last part was my own addition there. But this policy takes effect Friday night, and it applies not just to visitors who until now have been allowed to bring weapons into the building if they have a concealed carry permit. Also in Colorado, we can do that in state government buildings like the DMV and things like that. Any place that there aren't permanently affixed metal detectors in state and city government. But this ban also applies to senators and delegates, even those who are law enforcement officers, which that makes zero sense. There is someone, I'm looking for her name right now. Senator Amanda Chase, a Republican from Chesterfield, says, I'm going to uphold the U.S. Constitution and Virginia Constitution. Last year, she wore a 38 special on her hip. We talked about it on this show, in fact, and now she's been carrying her firearm in an American flag pattern purse. Now, if Capitol Police officers are made aware that a lawmaker is violating a policy, they will have to go to leadership of both bodies and explain to them what is going on. And asked if what they would do if leaders responded by instructing him to escort a lawmaker out. The Capitol Police officer chief said that I'm going to have to think on that. And yeah, like they're just trying to take it all, Tim.
Yeah, well, and you kind of nailed it with the thought. They're using the word policy because they passed a policy or a rule, but it's not the law. The law is something different. So that's why he's in a quandary as to what should I do? Because the law says one thing and their rule says another. And some of these legislators are like, look, I have immunity here according to our state law, and I can't commit these crimes. I can't be charged for them. And it's a rule. So I'm going to continue packing. And if you're going to report me, go ahead and report me, because they know that this is probably not going to work. They, in that case, probably would remove civilians who, when asked or come to the door and say, look, I'm going to carry in there. And I don't know this, but I imagine they would enforce that. But legislators have a whole different level of protection according to state law. And again, it's a rule, not a law. Not yet. They may pass a law, but it has to be a law first.
Yeah, which then we go to property rights and private property. And if it's state building, who's the owner of the property? And yeah, that is an interesting conundrum. Shelley, this is it's getting crazy in Virginia, but now they're even kind of doing it inside the buildings as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the one thing that strikes me as interesting is that they're actually applying it across everybody. I mean, to say that the lawmakers and I heard you say police officers there can't carry is, well, I think everybody should be able to carry. Obviously, it's nice that they're at least being consistent for a change. I also think it's cool that there are enough lawmakers carrying that they're worried about it.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I do want to give a shout out to Troy Clopton. He said he'll be there, and Troy is one of the hosts of the God and Guns podcast on the Firearms Radio Network. So Ben, if you're watching right now, after SHOT next week, which I believe Jake is going to host, but the week after, if we could get Troy on there to be a panelist on This Week in Guns, that would be fantastic, because then he could tell us about what he saw. And Tim, you'll be there. Maybe we could get you on there as well.
Sure.
Just throwing that out there, Ben, if you're watching. Let's talk more. Magazines are the latest target of Virginia legislators. They want to basically outlaw anything over 10 that holds over 10 rounds of ammo. And there are hundreds of thousands of high-capacity magazines already legally owned by Virginians. They give 4 options: drill a hole through it, or otherwise make it inoperable; store the magazine outside the state of Virginia; send or sell the magazine to somebody in another state that is legally allowed to own that kind of magazine; surrender it to authorities in the state of Virginia. And this would be a felony if you're found even possessing a magazine that holds more than 10 rounds of ammo. No grandfathering, nothing there. Now, in Colorado, we do have magazine restrictions, but we are grandfathered, and it's a whole big thing. But Shelley, you talked a little bit about it already, but you don't have it. But yeah, they're going after every single aspect, right?
Yeah, that's scary, because I'm sitting here trying to think where all I might have magazines that are over 10 rounds, and I could probably not easily account for all of the ones in my house.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, I recall reading the law that they're proposing here in Washington, and I believe that we were being grandfathered in as well. But I can't imagine. I would not be able to find them all. I would be arrested for a felony.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's funny because, like, in my car right now, I probably have 20 magazines over 10 rounds. Tim Knight, this all seems very familiar to us, doesn't it? It
does, Sean. It is what they did in Colorado, and doing that. And the grandfather thing is their fallback position. They're going to try and go for it all. I think they went full in to Mayor Big Gulp and said, hey, what are all of the things we could possibly throw at this? And this was one of them, is let's just make this so dumb. And they're going to try and swing for the fences and get it. I think their fallback position is the grandfather position, which they've already started to do with other things. But they're trying it all. And I got 20 in the car. I've got, nope, I couldn't possibly get them all. They're also legally owned things. And, the criminals, again, are not the ones they're not using. I mean, I can't say they don't use them, but why are you punishing law-abiding citizens who've done nothing wrong with the legally owned thing? And then overnight saying, and these are people, again, who've gone through background check after background check after background check when they purchased these firearms. And then you're saying, oh no, these people can't be trusted. Why? They've given you no reason. In fact, they've reinforced that you should be trusted, that they should be trusted time and time and time again. But what do you do? How do you treat them? It's looking a whole lot more like Virginia citizens are being turned into subjects, Sean.
Yeah. Let's go one step further. Virginia Democrats seek to make suppressor possession a felony. This comes to us by Delegate Mark Levine, Trader. Would make it a felony to own legally purchased firearm suppressors in Virginia. Under this new bill, Virginians who have undergone the legal process to acquire suppressor, which is about anywhere between a 8 and 14-month wait, a $200 tax stamp, background checks, fingerprints, photographs, all those other things, would be labeled felons after the passage of a 6-month grace period in which suppressors can be transferred to persons out of state who are allowed to own them. Also kind of funny because it takes more than 6 months to transfer a suppressor legally to someone else. So this basically you'd have to destroy them or render them inoperable or surrender them to a state or local law enforcement agency. So let's see, we've talked about magazines. We've talked about now suppressors. They want to take suppressors. Shelley, that's unacceptable, right?
Well, I find it interesting that U.S. lawmakers seem to have such a backward stance on suppressors. I mean, even in Europe, they try and almost encourage people to buy them. And here, not only is it already difficult, but now they're trying to make it even worse. Why?
Yeah.
In what way does that make sense?
Yep. 100% agree. And now, Tim, I want to go to you for suppressors, but I also want to interject one other thing. There's another bill in place that puts CCW reciprocity in jeopardy. They basically, right now, anyone who has a legal concealed carry permit in another state basically has reciprocity. In Virginia, they want to make it to where they can identify which states have the appropriate training requirements and other requirements to get a concealed carry permit. So now we've talked about magazines, suppressors, and now this as well. Thoughts there, Tim?
Yeah, first of all, the suppressor thing, as you, Sean, well know, is a major hassle, and it's a long check, and they double check, and you're like super secret squirrel checked. I mean, and you have to pay the tax stamp, sin tax, and then they're going to tell you can't have these things after the massive wait. They haven't even thought it through because, I've had stamps take 13 months, not a problem. Yay. And then you're going down the concealed carry route, which again, where the reciprocity thing where they have not had issues. Where is this coming from? Because this is not an issue. What they're trying to do is just, again, make it so onerous. Do they realize that people simply won't go to that state? They'll simply pass. They won't try not even to pass through there. Do they realize not only, again, are they punishing people who've gone through extensive background checks and been checked, and most states have probably higher training requirements in the South and in states that actually touch Virginia or similar training requirements. This is a nothing burger to the highest levels. And they're, again, just trying to alienate absolutely everyone they can with no reason. And the same guy who's sponsoring this and all the others is, again, he went straight to Mayor Big Gulp's best, greatest hits and said, let's pull them all out. Let's get them all.
Yeah.
Everything.
So they've done all this. They had a bill on the table that was basically an AR-15 confiscation bill, but because of basically the response on the January 13th, 2020 Virginia Senate meetings, they have withdrawn the AR-15 confiscation bill. My guess is to reauthor it, change it in a way that they think they can actually push through. In this article from americaskeepersinc.com, at the very end, it says that Richard Cosner, a Chester, Virginia preacher, was present to oppose new gun controls. He says, attempts to legislate gun control serve as a way to usurp the Constitution. I completely agree. I want to hear you guys' opinion because I don't think this is a win necessarily. I think it's just a stay of execution. Shelley?
I mean, with everything else that's going on, it almost feels like they're trying to get away with as much as they can to make it look like they're being reasonable, quote. And then they can just put that in later, and then they're only doing one thing, and it's still reasonable, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely don't think that's a good thing. I think it makes it less ridiculous, even though it's incredibly ridiculous.
I know.
And that may make it more palatable to voters that might not know better.
Yeah. Tim?
Yeah, I think you're right, Sean. This is a no-win situation because any compromise could be anything from registration to the state police to, they've gone so far as to propose things like you can't even have parts to these guns. So there's no win here unless this bill completely goes away and the registration of all semi-automatics, all guns for that matter. This is just slowing the boil of the frog. That's all this is. And that's what their entire plan was from the beginning. Propose ludicrous, throw it against the wall, see what sticks, and maybe we can gut through this. And Sean, the tough part for me here in watching all this, because I've got tons of friends, I've got friends and family in Virginia, and a lot of gun owners need to be paying way more attention because Bloomberg, unfortunately, and I know people are listening and are probably going to get mad, but we all need to be way more involved because Bloomberg got Virginia on the cheap because people didn't show up in the polls because Virginia has off-year elections in 2019, and we just didn't show. And I don't live in Virginia, but we as gun owners did not show up in the numbers that we needed to. And that has got to change. No longer can I just want to be left alone be part of the excuse. It cannot. After this rally, after the other time you went to the Capitol on the 13th, you have to go, and I'm not sure anyone's going to say this at the rally, you have to go home and you have to campaign. You have to maybe run for office yourself. You need to knock on doors because if we don't get this back, if Virginia does not get this back within an election cycle or two, they're going to lose it forever.
Yeah. And I will also point out that, look, us showing up, 2A advocates, gun people showing up, took that bill off the table. Whether it's good or just a temporary thing, we don't know. But showing up helps. Look, these are individual rights, people. If we don't fight for them as individuals, we cannot rely on the VCDL, the NRA, the GOA, FPC, Second Amendment Foundation. We can't rely on them to do our job for us. We can rely on them to enhance the job that we do. But if we don't show up, and people are showing up in Virginia, 120 plus sanctuary counties, people showing up
130 last night.
Up 130. All right. So it goes up constantly. I can't even keep track of it, honestly. If we show up, if we do these things, Tim just mentioned it. We got I don't know. We got complacent and this is what happened. And now we're having to fight for it. And I will use this this couple seconds here just to remind people that we have basically three things to fight for. We have advocacy and us fighting for our individual rights. We have lobbying, which is these organizations that I just mentioned, basically threatening legislators and getting them to do the things that we as their constituents want them to do. And when both of those things fail, we have litigation, and litigation has failed for us in Colorado. It's failed for Shelley in Washington, because once these things go in place, they don't come out of place. It's almost impossible to pull them out. We recalled the head of the Colorado Senate and Tim had a ton to do with that. Two of them actually, John Morse and Angela Garone, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, and it only put a pause on it, Sean. It went from 2013 until 2018. They touched nothing because it was like, look, Colorado voters are fired up. But what happens is that's the eternal vigilance part of liberty. If we're not eternally vigilant, if we don't continue to hold people responsible, don't continue to go to the polls and engage, it will not work. And that's why in Colorado, we got all fired up and we did some great stuff. And I met some great people and some stuff got done. But the legislature didn't change. People thought, oh, somebody else has got this for us. Nobody else has this for us. It's an individual right. And as you just said, and this doesn't matter really what state you're in, join all the groups you want, give them money if you think they're worthy of your money, but you cannot give your proxy to somebody else. And I realize people have jobs, take time off work. As a friend of mine says, look, you're not going to go to jail if you miss a couple of your kids' soccer games. You won't. We need you at your state capitals. If you don't know what to do, gosh, call me. I'll tell you how to go to your state capital.
Absolutely. Shelley, Washington, you guys have had a ton of stuff shoved down your throats as legal gun owners, and it's been pretty awful. It's important there too.
It is, absolutely. And like I said, we're looking at rallies. I believe there's one on Monday in Olympia.
Is it not Friday? Is it the 17th?
Is it?
Yeah.
You might know better than I do. I wait until one of my friends posts on Facebook that they're going, and then I'm like, oh, okay, it's time to go.
I thought right before I came on, a friend of mine said I believe it was the rally on Friday.
On Friday? Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, and the bill that they have on the table right now is scary. I've read the text of the bill, and it is the whole deal, the full assault weapons ban with the high capacity magazines, and reading their descriptions of guns that fit into this there's kind of a tragic hilarity to it, I guess, of the way they're trying to encompass things that it just doesn't make any sense. And, I really hope that Washington gun owners can show up, and I hope we can fight this, because the repeal on 1639, yeah, it went okay, but it obviously didn't go well enough. And if we don't step up our game, then we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, the game will step on you.
Yeah.
If you don't step up. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, get involved, people. If you're just posting on Facebook, then you're not doing enough and you're part of the problem. Like, you have to get off your butt. I'm sorry, I know it sucks. Like, I don't want to get off my butt either. But we all need to. We all need to get involved as individuals, because no one else is going to fight for these rights. And I will say this, that Virginia is probably the closest that we've been. We hear people talking about the Boogaloo and the Big Luau and things like that all the time. But Virginia is a powder keg right now. We're seeing it with state of emergency. We're seeing it by preventing legislators from exercising their Second Amendment individual rights. And don't forget, these are granted to us naturally, but the Supreme Court held them up in Heller 2008. And we have to be out there. We have to be doing the things that we need to do, because I'll tell you what, if you're not going to get off your butt and help us change things, if you're not going to get off your butt and show up at your state capitol and do the things you need to do, then I would challenge that you're not going to get off your butt to fight for the revolution that you're all talking about on Facebook. And
yeah, and Sean, I'm not when I talk to people, I'm not asking them to do anything I'm not doing already. And that, I mean, admittedly, I'm a grassroots activist, so I'm not, and I'll help. I'll do it with you. A previous role as a director of the NRA that took that role very responsibly. I haven't stopped. We all have our strengths. John, you have a strong voice that you use. Shelley, I know you're very active in your community, and I see pictures of you doing all kinds of things and engaging with the community. It's going to take all of us doing our thing to reach out there and make that difference, because that's the strength they're going to underestimate us with if we use it, is that we use each other to succeed and stand with good people. And that's what's got to happen.
Yeah. And I will also say that Troy brought up the thing that I had as my note for my final thing that I wanted to talk about. He said they are trying to scare away all the people that are planning to come, and that he hopes it causes more to show up because people have to be fearless. I agree. I think that a lot of this is fear mongering because they're like, oh, we have credible threats of violence, hoping that people don't show up. This is a classic propaganda technique, and don't fall for it. Show up, be strong, be proud, be safe, and be an American, because that's really all we really have in this world, is our freedoms and the lives that we live. So don't be afraid. Go out there, get involved. And that's all the time we have for the stories today. I think it was an excellent discussion. I'm really glad we got to talk a lot about Virginia. But before we go, I'd like to hear, Shelly, tell us where people can find you, what you've been up to, like what's going on. The Peak.
Yeah, so I work in marketing at Rainier Arms. So we have our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Rainier Arms. We talk about cool products there. And of course, The Peak is our new podcast. I'm one of the co-hosts with my boss, Ari. And we've had some really cool people on there. We just talked to Maria Mathis from Quarter Circle 10 and Aaron Pallett of Operation Blazing Sword and the Pink Pistols. So we're really excited about it. And firearmsradio.tv/the-peak. And yeah.
Very cool. Aaron was actually a panelist on this show last week, I believe. But yeah, keep up the great work, Shelly. Thank you so much for coming. And if you see him, tell him that I said that I want you back because you did great.
Okay, I'll let him know.
Okay, great. Sounds awesome.
All right.
Tonight, I know you're up to a lot all the time. Where can people find you? What you've been up to?
They can find me pretty much on all social media at Timothy Knight USA, because I'm represent the whole USA. Glad to stand with good people. am off doing grassroots. I'm headed to Richmond on Friday, and I'll be there through Tuesday. Troy, okay.
Troy said, if I'm killed, pinch me.
Yeah, and I'll be right there with Troy. Don't forget, I'm headed to Richmond over the weekend. Got family there. I go there often. I do grassroots, Sean. I am planning a pretty long journey this summer to get people out to vote in battleground states, North Carolina, Wisconsin, probably Michigan, and probably a few other states. I do a podcast called To the Republic, which is a long form interview of people making a difference in our industry and standing up for freedom. And that is pretty much what I can talk about.
All right. I love it. Go check out all the great stuff that they're up to. I thank them very much for spending their time with us this evening and, just talking about the news stories and trying to get you guys fired up to get out there and get off our butts and fight for our individual rights as individuals. And then, let these organizations and things help us out and not do the job for us. So go check all of them out. Check out The Peak. Check out To the Republic. Check out everything else that they're up to. And don't forget to check out our advertisers, Patriot Patch Company. That's patriotpatch.co. And don't forget the Arizonian citizen that helped the trooper out using a firearm in self-defense. That's what Second Call Defense specializes in. Any kind of firearms use for self-defense situation. They make sure you don't spend any time that you don't need to. They take care of the legal, not just defense, but also damages if it gets to that point. And that's at firearmsradio.tv/SCD. Don't forget, This Week in Guns is produced by Kenny Ortega and Benjamin Allreed and is a production of the Firearms Radio Network. We will talk to all of you next week.